stark difference, because what people know as Hyderabad city today was the erstwhile Hyderabad state, a much larger territory, covering Maharashtra, parts of northern Karnataka. There are parts of Berar that were there, and then there was the Hyderabad state, the entire state of Hyderabad as well. So all of this came together to become what is known as the entire state of Deccan, Hyderabad Deccan. So the Dakhani cuisine is a much older evolution, and it took a lot of time to come together to what it is known as, and only now we see it actually broken down into regional cuisines like the Rayalaseema, the Telangana, the northern Karnataka cuisine, Maharashtrian cuisine, all of that, right? So all of these parts used to come under the Hyderabad state. So I'm going to talk about Dakhani cuisine, and it's a part of some interesting stories. So my talk is not going to be much on recipes, though I'll try and cover some common, food that most people would love to hear about or are familiar with. But I'll try and cover some of the interesting stories that are there, which are part of the cuisine, right? So let me take you through what is Dakhani cuisine all about. So cuisine evolves largely on the highways and bylanes of history. So any dish that you talk about today there is no definite date that you can give that this particular dish was originated in this particular year or this century or anything like that. It evolves over a period of time, right? And so much so with the Indian cuisine, because it has influences of both Mughlai, Persian, there are various other influences. We were ruled by the British, so there's a British influence that is there that you will find. Then there were French, which were prior to British, they were French here, and they were Dutch as well. They were Portuguese. So all of these put together will have an impact over a period of time on the cuisine of whichever part of the world that you go. So that's why I say cuisine evolves on the highways and bylanes of history, and not so much in actual kitchens. Kitchens actually only adopt the cuisine, right? And what we see at home, we actually really only adopt the cuisine. So, Hyderabad, and a lot of people are familiar with this word Ganga Jamni Tehzeeb, which is, but the cuisine of Deccan is a little more wider. It's just not purely Ganga Jamni. It comes from 5 different linguistic sects basically, and it's known as the Panchvani, Sangam is what it's actually known as. This is the confluence of both Gujarati, Marathi, there is Urdu, which is the language of Muslims, which invaders that came at that point of time, Kannada, and then Hindi as well, right? All of these linguistic sects come together to make this particular cuisine what it is. Now an interesting aspect, most people are not familiar, and I'll try to give that analogy to give you an example of how the Dakhani cuisine evolved, right? And it's very important to understand that the Dakhani cuisine came in through a very different route, right? It was not just earlier the Deccan that were known as, but also different states, right? There was the Kakatiyas of Warangal that were there, the Hoysalas of Dwarsamudra. All of these were regional kingdoms at that point of time, each having their own cuisine. And eventually, later, slowly became into what is known as Dakhani cuisine. So, now, an important aspect is to understand the language of Urdu, right? The word Urdu comes from the word camp. And there were 4 different camps that were there, alright? So, the first one is Urdu-e-Mutalla, and the second one is Urdu-e-Mazhab. Now, these 2 are largely high ranking, which is one is the the camp of the rulers, basically. The second one the camp of the princes. So these 2 were the elite class, primarily. They were the next 2 rungs, which were Urdu and Mawla, which is the nobles, and then the word Urdu, which is like the camp of the regular soldiers, basically. Now these two were the large sector of people that were actually going down and interacting, or rather let me say put the right word, saying that setting up, going for war, and they were actually establishing their camp along with the local people, right? So this language that evolved over a period of time in this country, slowly became the language of Urdu, but the word originates from the word camp. Now, how did this language of Dakhani evolve? It has a little bit of history to it. First, Muhammad bin Qasim invaded Sindh, so I'll go back in a little bit of history. So Arabic, mixed along with Sindhi language to form a new strain of language that came about. Subsequent to which, Muhammad bin Ghazni invaded, and then the Persian mixed with Punjabi. So now you have one language strain which is, Arabic with Sindhi. Now you get a new strain which comes along with Persian and Punjabi mixed together, right? So these strains slowly evolve and started coming into a new language, and that language became as what is known as Urdu, which was commonly spoken in up north. Then came the invasion of Alauddin Khilji, and he invaded Deccan. So what did he do? He took these armies of the north and marched towards the south. And while he marched towards the south, he started, carrying along people with him, which were, there were Maharashtrians there were all other languages that came along with local Kannada speaking. And then he came into and invaded Deogiri. So this is an interesting photograph or a picture, a lithograph of Deogiri of this group. So he invaded Deogiri almost 6 times. Invaded Deccan 6 times, and at each point of time he was actually invading these kingdoms and establishing himself out here. Subsequent, Tughlaq, he shifted his capital to the Deccan and set up his entire system out here. So you will see that what was happening in the north was formation of one language strain of Urdu. But in the south there was a different language strain that was being formed with the confluence of all of these. So now you had the Sindhi and Punjabis coming together along with the Persian and Punjabis also at the same time, and they brought along and they came to Gujarat along with Maharashtra and Karnataka, and they set up their entire system out here in the Deccan. So that regional language that actually was newly formed was the Dakhani language. Right? It's a different form of Urdu, but having a lot of words from Punjabi, Kannada, all of them put together, and that's how the Dakhani language was evolved. So similarly is how the cuisine of the Deccan also evolved slowly over a period of time, and it has those elements that come together, not only of Persian and Arabic, but there are some very regional strains as well, and I'll take you through that. Now, though Islam came through an invasion route, but you'll be surprised, and I'm sure a lot of you already know about it, but both on the Malabar and the Coromandel coast, there was intensive trading that was already done, and there were Arab traders that were already settled out here. A very, very interesting community that you may have heard of is the Mapilas. Right? Mapilas are on the coast of Kerala, and that community is, the word Mapila means brother-in-law basically, and that community was trading in these parts much older than Islam itself, right? So that community again, they were speaking their own dialect that was there. They had their own influence of on the cuisine that was there. So you have I don't know how many of you have heard, there are many strains of biryani. There's not one strain of biryani, there are many strains of biryani that are there. Some come from the north, some come from Persia, some come from the already existing Arab traders that were cooking the Mapila biryani, which is also there. There is one strain on the Coromandel coast also that is there, which I'll talk about a little later on how this subject. So this is how the entire kingdoms were being formed at that point of time. And narrowing down to the Sultanate of the Deccan is, these were the other 5 dynasties that were eventually formed, during that period. Ahmednagar, Berar, Bidar, the Bijapur as well as the Qutub Shahi, which is Golconda kingdom. And all the way from 1347 all the way to 1512, these various kingdoms were being formed and setting up their entire thing. Now, very interesting to notice, see these are Lashkari foods. So when these armies march, they don't have many ingredients to carry along with them. So they carry something which is very, very light. At the same time, it's easy to cook. Alright? And the third most element that food needs to provide to people is the energy that food can give. So that means the vitality of the food has to be so good that you consume little but can actually prepare you for war. Right? So there's a whole lot of science that was actually going around in food which is almost lost today. And you'll be surprised to know that wheat didn't exist as a primary food source. And a lot of that is our staple today, but never existed with the armies of the north. When they were coming, that was not good. And their primary things was millets and meats, all of that. And so there are multiple stories around that as well. Now, most of you are familiar with the spice trade and the silk routes. These two are the more common known trading routes that basically were there, and people were trading for cardamom, pepper, pepper being the largest exporter out of this country from Kerala. That was happening at that point of time. And of course the silk route was a different route that was there. But most people are not aware about that there existed what is known as the inland spice route as well. So the spice route that you commonly are aware about is the route that travels from the west, comes to Cochin, goes all the way to Sri Lanka, and then further goes into Sumatra, Java, and the Southeast Asian countries. Right? So that's the commonly known as these spice and trade routes. But who are the guys who were actually wanting to be, or the rulers of the spice trading route were nothing but the Portuguese at that point of time. And Portuguese set up camp here in Goa in 1498. Actually came set up in Cochin first, and then eventually in 1510 is when they annexed or captured Goa, November 25th. So they were largely initially established only for the purpose of trade. So their purpose was only to take pepper out of this country and trade in other things like alamkari and all various other things, spices. But what did they do, which is not commonly known to people, is that they introduced two things to India which later became more common to us, more important than things like pepper, which are called red chilies. So they were the one who introduced red chilies in 1510, and they actually started cultivating chilies in Goa. That particular strain still survives and is very popular. It's called the Goai Mirchi. So the Goai Mirchi is the first introduced chili into this country, and that happened in 1510. Subsequently, what was happening is, now they were initially only a trading belt, right? So they were only primarily focused on trade. But these chili came from South America. So they were already wanting to figure out what they can do with this. So they started planting this chili and trying to cultivate it in Goa. But they realized very quickly that the monsoon that is there, which is quite heavy in that part, the chilies were not able to survive for too long. And they could not take it out of the country. So what did they do was they started looking at various other breeds or varieties of chilies that there was, and they started cultivating them in the Deccan, which is in the Krishna district basically, and Guntur belt. And that's why even today, the Krishna and the Guntur districts both are the highest producer of chili. But this is not because of some accident. This is a very, very systemic plan that the Portuguese got into, and to actually trade it out of Machilipatnam, right, which was the largest trading port in this side of, this thing was Machilipatnam, basically controlled by the Qutub Shahis. And which was not known as Machilipatnam at that point of time, Masulipatnam. So Masuli, the word Masuli comes from linen and not Machli. So Machli was a very later word that evolved. And if you read Hobson Jobson, I think most people are that book, you will understand how these words evolve. So, this is known as the land spice route which eventually formed. And not only was chilies being cultivated, but tobacco also got introduced in Bijapur. And in fact, that hookah that we people are familiar with today was actually something that came out of Deccan. So tobacco and chili was something that was introduced by the Portuguese and eventually started getting cultivated here in the Deccan, especially in these two belts, which is the Krishna belt as well as the Guntur belt. So this is about tobacco. Abhishek Patel is the gentleman who is credited of creating the hookah, and then that's how it got popularized from Bijapur and eventually went all across, across the country. So Machilipatnam or Masulipatnam is a very, very critical, almost like a forgotten port. But there are two ports that are very, very important during 1500s, 1600s. Primarily there's Canbay, which is on the coast of Gujarat, and then there is Machilipatnam, which is here in south, on the eastern side. And out of Machilipatnam is where all the spice trading, the diamond trade, the kalamkari trade, tobacco trade used to happen, and these were used to go to Southeast Asia from this particular route, right? So this is how the chilies actually started becoming more attractive towards people. Otherwise, if you go back and study, so what did I do was I used to study a lot of old texts that were there, and when you read these recipe books, you will pre-1500 you will never find the word chili anywhere. So when you start digging in more, you realize that there is only word black pepper which is there, and there were two, of course, the long and the round pepper, basically. The pipli, the two varieties of pepper that are commonly cultivated here in India, which were commonly available in every cuisine, whether it was Dakhani with its Qutub Shahi text as well, and including anything that you would take in Mughlai cuisines as well. So all of these and Awadh and other regional cuisines that you would pick up, they would largely have influence of only pepper, which is black pepper, and no word of chili post this thing. But over a period of time, chili became so popular, largely one is that it's an extremely pungent spice, though not of much medicinal value, because the pepper, what it actually infuses is actually the critical part of the garam masala. So it not only helps you in digestion, but it actually activates your digestive fire as well. So your absorption of vitamins become much more easier when you consume pepper in your food. But chilies don't actually have any positive effect, just that it gives you a lot of pungent taste, which people enjoy. Right? So that's the chili part. Then another regional player, but almost forgotten, are the Samastans, basically. Now these were, older than the Qutub Shahis and the Asif Jahis. They were already existing out here. These were vassal kingdoms, and they were small rulers. You may have heard of the places like Vanaparthi, Jatparol, Polancha. All of these were small samastans. So they were already ruling, small kingdoms, and they had their alliances or their regions, towards the Kakatiyas or the Hoysalas. They were committed to them. But once they were defeated, they formed new alliances with the, then invaders at that point of time, and the Subedars in the Deccan that eventually came. Qutub Shahis and later the Asif Jahis, they formed their alliances with these guys. The good thing was that they existed, coexisted together without much this thing. But they had their own cuisine, which is older than the Dakhani cuisine that we know. So a lot of dishes today that you and I have in Hyderabad today are influenced from the Samastans and various other strains that are coming. Just to show you some of the places that, so on the left hand side, the Raja Somanupal of Gadwal, and then there is Balwant Bahadur of peace in the region, right? Otherwise they will Lashkari Khane because the armies will continue to be at war, right? And the cuisine will never stabilize. For cuisine to stabilize, the most important thing that you require is peace in that particular region. So the good part was that the Qutub Shahis adopted and also ruled the Telugu population, but were also, some of them were also born out of Hindu wedlocks as well. So this is the most interesting part, because not only their language was Telugu, a lot of them, their cuisine also was much more Telugu at that point of time. So if you look at the Muhammad Qutub Shah itself, he was the son of Bhagirathi, not Telugu woman. So his love for Telugu poetry as well as the then language which was popular out there, which was Dakhani, Urdu, he was a master of both, right? So all of these evolved and they played a very, very important aspect. Now why is this period of the Qutub Shahi period the most important? Because they had their legions were towards the Shah of Iran, right? So very important thing that you must understand, there is the Friday prayers that were read in the state, or the khutbah was to be read for the Shah of Iran and not for the Mughal ruler, which was the then that is cited as one of the reasons. Safi sir will probably throw more light on that. But cited as one of the most important reasons for Aurangzeb to invade the Deccan as well, right? One of the reasons. So they used to read the khutbah for the Shah of Iran, and they had, like, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but Mir Mobin Astarabadi, which was the then Prime Minister or the Peshwa for the kingdom, was also Iranian. So there was a heavy influence of Iran on this particular thing, and you will realize that in this kingdom, the dishes that started coming out at that point of time were completely Persian, right? So they were so heavily influenced by Persian that what they used to eat commonly at home, I mean, what they would cook in the imperial kitchen. The word for imperial kitchen is called the matbakh. So if you are not familiar with that, the word matbakh is the imperial kitchen. And they used to cook, so dishes like, the words like these, korma, thalia, salan. You may think that these are words that are common or formed out of here, but they are not. They are actually completely Persian words. Shikampur, Aapos, Haris, Kupuli, Ahari, biryani. So biryani is also, there's a different story to biryani, which I will take you through a little later. That's a completely different creation, and it's more of a creation of India and not so much, for any other part of the world. Then there are words like dolma, kofte. So whenever you make a kofte, next time you remember this is not an Indian word, it comes from Persia. It comes from Iran. Then things like sheer korma, zarda, gile firdos. Again, these are all Persian influences on. So the Qutub Shahis brought in that strain of Iranian cuisine, or that influence of Iranian cuisine in the Deccan. So you see how the cuisine is evolving from Lashkari Khane to now heavily influenced by Persian, and that adopts a new strain. So you have new dishes started to evolve now. So this is just a photograph of the board. Another interesting story that most people may not be aware about, the audience, I'm sure a few of them are aware, that the Asif Jahi flag, right? So what happened was, 1713 is when Mir Kamruddin was given the title for the Subedar, and he was to take up the Subedari of the Deccan. And when he was going to be transferred out here, there is a legend that goes by that he was lost in the woods, and then he had landed up at a particular saint, and that saint offered him some food, and he ate 7 kulchas out of it, right? That story has 2 parts to it. Mir Kamruddin himself said that the kulcha is not part of the flag, it comes from my name, which is the moon. Kamar, which means the moon, is this thing. But subsequently, the 6th Nizam, also while they were reorienting the flag of the Deccan, or flag of the Hyderabad state, he mentioned on a farman saying that yes, it is actually the kulcha. So that copy of the farman is also there, and so it was approved in 1899, where he actually said that this is a kulcha, and that became an integral part of the flag as well. So it retained that legend, what people call as the 7 loaves, retains till today. And so you see, understand how the flag is influenced by cuisine as well at the same time. Now, when the Asad-Jahis came, now see, this is an important part. So each time there were new rulers coming into and setting up their camp or their establishment or their kingdom, they were changing the way the cuisine was. So now from being Persian in adaptation, it started slowly moving towards Mughlai food, right? And it also had heavy influences of Hindu influences in the food as well, because the Asad-Jahis brought along a very important community with them, who were actually darogas of their kitchen. Right now, this is a particular Kayas family. The photograph that you see out here is of a gentleman named by the name of Bansi Raja, Father Girdhari Prasad. 7 generations of his family were largely in taking care of, 5 generations were directly taking care of the Nizam's household. Right, and they were largely the darogas of the kitchen. Right, so started with Rai Daulat Rai, subsequently moved to Raja Ram Prasad, who was also the, so Rai Daulat Rai came with Nizam, the first Nizam, and then was Raja Ram Prasad. He was in charge of the second Nizam's kitchen. After him was Rai Swami Prasad, Rai Nari Prasad, and subsequently the last of them to take care of the household of the kitchen was up till the 6th Nizam. Subsequent to that, it was, they kind of dismantled that entire position. So Raja Girdhari Prasad, Bansi Raja, was the last of them. That the family still survives. Their descendants are still living in Hyderabad. So he's now, very important aspect that people forget today is that actually your food was earlier your medicine. So if you had to figure out how to become stronger, healthier, you would have to focus all your energy and try and understand what the food and how it can transform the body, right? So the Hakims, the Ayurvedic doctors were the most important people in the imperial kitchens, basically. Not only imperial kitchens, but kitchens of nobles as well. Not so much as the commoners. But no dish that would be made for a season or for a day would go without the prescription of the Hakim. It is that detailed, and if you research the records,